Hey! Before we start, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It helps us grow and bring you more amazing stories. Your support means a lot. Now, let's get started. My name is Emily. I'm 22 years old, and I live in a small town in Tennessee. I'm currently in my final year of university, studying pedagogy because I've always dreamed of working with children. Since childhood, I've loved singing, and even though I hardly have time for hobbies now, I sometimes find a moment to sing the old melodies from the choir I once shone in. I've always enjoyed reading, especially novels where the characters overcome difficulties and emerge victorious. Sometimes I feel like my life is also such a novel, only the ending hasn't been written yet. My mom was the kindest person in the world, a person with a huge heart. She always put others before herself, even when it came at the expense of her own health. Even when it was hard for her to speak, she would look at me with such tenderness that just that gaze was enough for me to feel her support. She worked as a nurse until her health sharply declined. It got to the point where she could no longer work. She had home nurses, a feeding tube, and regular hospitalizations. When I was 12, her diagnosis came as a sentence: autoimmune myositis. It's a rare disease in which the immune system attacks its own muscles, causing inflammation and weakness. When Mom got sick, I had to become her support. I helped her with medical procedures. She needed care every day, and I couldn't turn away. Those were long hours when I sat next to her, changed bandages, and helped her with feeding through the tube. Mom always tried not to show her pain, telling me everything would be okay, but I could see how her body weakened day by day. But despite it all, she never stopped smiling. She always said that I was her happiness, and I needed to be strong. Mom tried so hard not to upset me, even though she could barely stay on her feet. I remember her smile, even when she was in pain, and it was the light I sought in the dark moments of my life. With my dad, everything was different. My parents divorced when I was 5, but I still looked forward to seeing him. My father was the complete opposite of my mother. He was always strict, demanding, and emotionally cold. Even when I brought home straight A's, he would just nod and say, "It's your duty." But if I did something wrong, his anger was uncontrollable. I remember how he yelled at me for breaking a plate, and then just left, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen. In that moment, I felt so small and helpless. After the divorce, he lived separately, and our visits were limited to weekends. I waited for those days eagerly because I wanted to feel like I had a dad who loved me. But those hopes shattered when I found that fateful notebook full of notes where he and his new wife called my mom an unfit mother. That word cut through my heart. How could they call a woman unfit, who, despite being sick, did everything for her child? That's when I first realized my dad wasn't the person I had imagined. That weekend, I locked myself in my room, didn't come out, didn't eat, just cried. And a couple of months later, he simply took me from school and said I would live with him. I was 13. My father's house was the complete opposite of our cozy corner. At Mom's house, it always smelled like fresh-baked goods and lavender. We often lit candles, and their soft light created a feeling of warmth and security. But at Dad's house, everything was sterile and cold. No personal items. Even the air felt heavy, as if the house itself was against me. His house became a prison for me. Everything there was cold and soulless: white walls, minimalist furniture, no comfort. There were no family photos, no warm blankets, no smell of homemade food. Just rules, duties, and a constant feeling that I was a burden. There was no warmth, no care. It was a house where I wasn't a child but a servant. The first 2 months were the hardest. He wouldn't let me see my mom, took my phone if I tried to talk to her, removed the door from my room. He only came home on weekends, and all the time before he arrived, I stayed with his wife, who hated me. I went grocery shopping, picked up my brother from school, cooked dinner. I had a secret credit card hidden under a shelf in the pantry. I used it to buy food, because otherwise, we would have gone hungry. When things were tough, I would find a way to contact Mom, and she would always say, "You're strong, you'll make it. You're my pride." Those words were my anchor in the darkest moments. Mom believed in me, even when I couldn't find the strength myself. She always said that everything would be okay and that every day was a new chance. I often remember her words, especially when I face difficulties. They still echo in my head, a warm reminder that no matter how hard it gets, there is always a way to keep going. But one day, his wife found the card, and everything collapsed. Dad stormed into my room, tore it apart and started choking me. I was 13. I couldn't fight back. I just cried and called my mom. She contacted child services, but it only made things worse. He did it again. I lived in fear. In the summer, I was allowed to see my mom. I went to her with my heart pounding, as if to a safe shore. We walked, watched old movies, baked cakes, just like before. It was a short but happy time. Then he took me again, and it all started over. When I went to high school, his wife left, and we moved to another house. Now we had new rules. One extracurricular activity, daily washing his uniform, cooking, taking care of my brother. It wasn't life, it was survival. But I adapted. I made friends, did well in school, sang in the choir. I created a masked, cheerful, kind, energetic girl, behind whom no one saw the pain. But one day, a month before the end of the second semester, my friends and I skipped class to copy homework. We got caught. Dad went crazy. He yelled at me for an hour, but I didn't feel anything anymore. I just stood there saying, "Yes, sir." Then he attacked me. I fought back, and we literally fought until his mother forced him to stop. I ran to the neighbors and called the police. I was taken to the hospital. They found internal bleeding. 2 days in intensive care, 2 weeks in psychiatry. I left with antidepressants that made me feel empty. The next few years passed in a fog. When I turned 18, I left. I graduated, went to college, got a boyfriend, helped others with their studies, applied to colleges, started running. I was still overweight 255 pounds, but I felt happier. But my dad didn't disappear. He called every week, saying I would quit school, get pregnant, ruin my life. He did everything to make me believe it. But I stood my ground. I studied, worked, cared for my nieces and nephews, held on. Eventually, I cut off all contact. Changed my number, deleted social media. But the fear remained. He haunted me until it became a wound. Surgery. A year of recovery. Selling the house. Returning to mom. And a month ago, he found me in a store. He saw me in sweatpants and a t-shirt and decided, he was right. He had a meltdown right in the store, screaming that I was a slut and a failure. A week ago, he called and said he was sorry. That if I wanted to talk, I could come to him. When my father apologized, I felt something inside me freeze. The anger I had been holding back for years seemed to wake up, but now I didn't know what to do with it. On one hand, his words sounded like an opportunity for healing, for finally having that long-awaited dad in my life. But on the other hand, I couldn't forget what he had done, those words he had spoken about my mom. My mind screamed that this wasn't sincere, that he just wanted me back as his little girl so he wouldn't be so lonely. But my heart. It longed for the hope that I could forgive him, but in reality, it was too soon. I didn't know what to do. Maybe I should give him a chance, but it's so hard to believe that someone who did such things can change. I don't know how to react to this. I can't forgive him. Mom supports me. My fiancé does too. But my relatives say I should give him a chance. I'm not sure I can. In the future, I want my children to know their grandfather. But how do I stop hating him? Should I forgive him? What do you think? Share your opinion in the comments. It's important to hear different points of view, because maybe your advice will help me sort out my feelings.